Go. Hi, today I am here with middle grade author Becca Wierwille, and I'm so excited to talk to you today, Becca. I've already fallen in love with your writing because I've been listening to one of her audiobooks, and actually my husband has been too, and we're way past the 7th grade mark here, but we still enjoyed it. So Becca, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer.
Yeah, this is a thrill. So you have got these, well, the 2 books out. We listened to the book. Let me look at my notes. It was Road Trip Rescue. And so you have Road Trip Rescue, Road Trip Return. Was Road Trip Rescue the name of the book, or is it the name of the series? I'm sorry.
Both. So Road Trip Rescue is the series, but also the first book in the series. So Road Trip Rescue released last October, and then Road Trip Return will be book 2 in the series, and that is going to release in September with a pre-launch on Kickstarter in April.
Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit later. I want to know more about Kickstarter, but I want to talk about this. Let's talk first about you, about how you got started writing, what inspired these books, and what you hope that your readers will take away from this.
I have always loved writing. So probably even before I could write, I remember making up stories. And once I could write, I would fill notebooks and notebooks of stories, which I know is a story for many writers. But then as I got older, I wasn't around a lot of authors. And so I didn't really see that as a career path. But then after my husband and I got married, I started to do some research about the publishing industry and just learn more. And I started dabbling in writing some different genres. And then I one day wrote a story that was almost autobiographical. It was kind of like some of my reflections from when I was in that middle grade age range, like 8 to 12. It was the story of me and my dog. Her name was Esther. And I talked about my arm. So I was born with a limb difference, missing half of my right arm. So I wrote a little bit about that. And it's not a story that's published or ever will be. It was like a practice book. But what I did learn as I was writing that was that I loved the middle grade voice. And I started to think more about the books that I read when I was that age and how much they meant to me and how much they still stick in my mind. So the books that I remember most are the books that I read when I was a kid. And they meant a lot to me. And so I just started to wonder, what if I would start writing books for that age range? And there is such a need for books for kids that have themes of faith and that show kids that they are wonderfully created by God. And so that's how I got started writing middle grade.
I love it. Do you have children of your own?
I have a daughter. She's only a year old though, so she's not quite
Okay.
ready for these books.
No, but still, and Esther, is that Esther after Esther of the Bible, or did you just name
Yes.
her?
Yes, it was because I thought she was just the most beautiful dog ever. And so I was like, well, Queen Esther was beautiful. So of course I have to name my dog Esther. And actually in Road Trip Rescue, the dog's name is Bo, and that's after Boaz. So just like I named my dog after a Bible character, Kimmy did the same thing in Road Trip Rescue.
I started, like I said earlier, I started listening to the audiobook. Your narrator is fabulous. I mean, absolutely fabulous. And the book is so well written, Becca. It really is. And it's hard as an author sometimes to read other books because I think our internal editor kicks in and we're constantly trying to fix whatever we think is wrong. Didn't happen here, but your writing is fabulous, but the narrator can make or break an audiobook. How did you find that? And tell us who is the narrator and how did you find her?
So the narrator is Talon David, and she is phenomenal. So she narrated one of my other favorite middle grade books, Please Return to the Lands of Luxury by John Tilton. And that's where I first heard her narration. And I was in awe of her character voices. And she just has a very natural way of reading that genre. And I know she does a lot of other genres too. But hiring a professional narrator like that is so expensive. And so I know we'll talk about Kickstarter in a bit too, but I made it one of my stretch goals on the Kickstarter campaign, which basically means if I hit a certain level of funding on that Kickstarter campaign, then I said I'd hire a professional narrator. And so I did hit that level and was able to hire her to do the audiobook. And I will say it was so much fun to listen to Road Trip Rescue myself, because as the author, like you're saying, we don't get to enjoy our books in that way necessarily, because whenever we're going in to read our books, we're usually, proofreading and looking for typos or revising and rewriting. And so it was the first time I got to experience my book as a performance. And so it was like a whole new way of listening to the story and enjoying the story. So definitely really enjoyed working with her and love having that audiobook available.
She was wonderful. I did have one of my books done in audio, and I was, like you said, it makes your book actually better because you're not trying to read it, you're just listening, and it's a pleasure to be able to do that. So that was very, very fun. It's been fun for me to listen. I haven't finished. I was telling Becca, we just recently moved, so it's been a little bit of a very busy time for us. And so I've just started getting back to writing yesterday after being off for maybe a month, and it's been it's been hard to jump back in. But so tell us a little bit more about where you got the inspiration for Kimmy, first of all, and then book 2. So you have Kimmy and her Aunt Skylar, who I was telling Becca, she irritated me a lot. Where I left off, I'm hoping she's gonna redeem herself, I'm sure. But she had me a little irritated. And then book 2, it has Daniel, and then Skylar is part of that, and Mateo is Daniel's brother. And so it takes off from Kimmy's story to Daniel's story, and Skylar continues in that story. Is Kimmy in that second book as well?
She is. Yep. She's in that second book as well.
Okay, good. So what inspired you to do Kimmy's story?
So Road Trip Rescue, Kimmy's story, it's the story of her searching for her long lost dog. So she's been missing her dog for 2 years, sees a picture in a magazine that she is just convinced is the same dog she lost 2 years ago. So she goes on this road trip with Aunt Skylar to find him. And Kimmy, like me, has a limb difference. So she was born missing half of her right arm. And something interesting, when I set out to write the book, Kimmy actually didn't have a limb difference. It was something that I added later because I realized as I was revising that she needed a really strong motivation to go after this dog, because he had to be more than just like a dog. She was doing something big. She's going on this road trip with her aunt that she's never done something like that before. It was out of her comfort zone. So what would make her really need to go after this dog more than anything? I thought, well, if she had maybe some negative experiences with friends in the past, that might have made this dog feel like more than just a dog. Maybe this dog was like her best friend. And then as I thought more, I thought, well, it would be kind of neat if I could reflect some of my own experience and have her maybe have some negative experiences related to being born with one hand, and then have that go into her motivation for wanting to find this dog, because, you know, a dog wouldn't make fun of you for having one hand. And so I'd always thought it would be fun to write a character with a limb difference, because that's not something that I saw in a lot of books growing up. I just didn't know at first that this would be the book. So that was a fun surprise for me. And it's not autobiographical. Kimmy's not me, but she does share a lot of my traits. And I think I put a lot of my story into her, even though it looks a lot different. So she was really, really fun to write. And then Daniel comes into Road Trip Rescue about halfway through. So he's a friend that Kimmy meets along the journey with Aunt Skylar. And I ended up writing book 2, Road Trip Return, from his perspective, because I had beta readers that were like, well, we need Daniel's story next. We want to hear more about Daniel. So it was fun to be able to dive into his perspective and see what his story would be about.
Well, because he's unique as well. He's been raised by his brother.
Yeah. He has a unique family situation. So him and his brother have been on their own. His brother is about almost 10 years older than him, or maybe almost 20 years older than him. My timelines are, I think he's older. Yeah, he's quite a bit older. I think he was 18. I'm trying to remember the dates in my mind because this was an interesting family dynamic to try to remember and sort out. But I think he was about 18 when, he was about 18 when Daniel was born. So he's quite a bit older, and he's raised Daniel. So he is really Daniel's primary person, his support system. And Daniel likes life with just the two of them. That's what he's used to. He's comfortable with it. Daniel is also neurodiverse. It's not something that I mention explicitly in the story. It's something that kind of just comes through naturally. So he just sees the world in a different way. And I like that because it's another way that through this series, kids can get to see characters that are different than them in some way or another, and be able to recognize and see that God creates all of us differently, and that it is wonderful the way he has created us uniquely for the adventures in our lives.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you have on your website, I don't know if this is your tagline, I have that you write stories about extraordinary kids, unexpected adventures, and forever friendships. Is that like a tagline for you?
Yeah, that's a theme that I try to insert in all of my stories.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about, I'm going to have a personal question here. Um, Being born with only one hand and knowing how important it is to type, how do you dictate? Can you type with one hand? I mean, that might sound like a lame question, but I'm just curious how you manage to do as much writing as you do.
That is a great question. It's one I've been asked before, but it's really hard for me to explain. So I wish I could show you on my keyboard here, but I do type and I type pretty fast, I think, because I've had lots of practice. So what I do is I use my left hand for, the left side of the keyboard. And then I actually use, so I have my arm up to my elbow. And so I use kind of the end of my arm to like type on the other side. So it was so hard in middle school when we had keyboarding class because they
Oh
would
my
cover up
God.
the keyboard and you'd have to like hit certain keys with certain fingers. I'm like, I can't do that. But I do have a way of typing pretty quickly that I don't know what I'm using what for. I couldn't tell you which letters I use this hand for or my arm for. But I do have, if anyone is really interested, on Instagram, I think I posted a reel several weeks ago of me typing. And so that could be a way that you can
Oh,
kind of get a quick image of what it looks like.
that's a great idea. Yeah, very, very clever. I remember seeing the movie Soul Surfer. Did you ever see that
Yes.
movie?
Oh, that's one of my favorites and one of my favorite books. Bethany Hamilton was a big role model for me growing up.
Yeah, seeing how she went from surfing without having the one arm was just incredible because you think about trying to get your balance and standing up and keeping it and everything.
Hmm.
It's a lot of work. So, I think it's inspiring for people to see somebody who has a little bit of difference than they do that they would think of as challenging, and instead you find it inspiring. You're like, okay, what are you whining about? Because you're typing too slow with your two feet, your two hands, and you just have to get over it. I think
Yeah.
people
And
get over it.
a lot of times our differences can actually create really interesting conversations. It's interesting to see how God can use the things that are different about us that sometimes we might see as a disability or something frustrating at times, that God can use those for a lot of good.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there are any mistakes in God's economy.
No.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your writing day. Like you have a 1-year-old child, so I'm sure before you had your daughter, I'm sure your writing time was more your own. How do you
Mhm.
juggle parenthood and being a wife and with this career?
So ideally, I would love to say that I always wake up before she does in the mornings and that I write first thing because that is my most creative time. So when it is possible, that's what I do. I try to wake up like a couple hours before her. Right now I go down to the basement. I have like a chair set up in front of a big window. Not that first thing in the morning I can see anything out the window anyway. When it's nice and warm out, I like to write outside when it's not the middle of the night. But her sleep isn't always the best. So if I didn't sleep well the night before, I definitely cannot wake up at 5 a.m. And also, she's unpredictable with what time she wakes up in the morning. So she doesn't always sleep until 7 a.m. So the mornings don't always work out. So I kind of have to depend on her nap time. So it really is like, okay, as soon as she goes down for a nap, then I'm like, all right, I got to start writing. But it is hard because I also have to balance, marketing and all of the other different aspects of publishing. So it's hard to make sure that I'm prioritizing the writing. And that's what I've learned is the very first thing that I do as soon as I have a chance to sit at my computer, I try to make it the writing, even if it's only 10 minutes. And most of the time, if I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm just going to write for 10 minutes, then I can do other things. A lot of times I'll get into the story and I'll end up writing for a little longer. So I just try to prioritize that and then I can move off to all the other things on my to-do list.
There's a lot of marketing and that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
to do as well. I know that's hard, juggling a lot. And then, of course, your husband, what does he do?
My husband is a loan officer, so he works in
Right.
finance.
Yeah. So you're a very busy person with all that you have going on.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Kickstarter because I saw that on your website before
Hmm.
we clicked onto Zoom here, and I have never seen anybody do that with as an author before. I'm curious how that works for you.
Yeah. So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform. Basically, it's a creator, or in this case, an author. More authors have been using it than used to. would put up a project, or in this case, a book, and they would set a specific goal. So my goal for my last book was $1,000. And that was not to cover all of the costs associated with publishing, but to cover like an initial print run and shipping and that sort of thing. And if enough people back the project at different reward levels, so there's like, you could get the ebook and the paperback or a hardback, and they're all at different levels of funding. So a backer could say, okay, I want to pay, $25 for a paperback. They could back the project. And then if the project hits its funding goal, so $1,000, then the backers get their rewards, and the creator gets the money. If they don't hit the funding goal, then no one gets anything. So it's all or nothing, which is kind of just a fun thing to go through, but it's also very public, which is interesting and can be a little bit nerve-wracking. It's not the same as, what's the other thing? I can't remember right now, but it's not. Yeah, it's not the same as GoFundMe. Yeah, thank you. Because people are getting something in exchange.
Right.
It's usually a little more expensive though than buying a book from Amazon, because you're buying the book directly from the author. And a lot of times there's something, special about it. Like in this case, for my books, they're buying the book early. They usually get it a couple months before it actually releases. I'm signing the copies. I will put people's names in the back of the book if they want it in the back of the book, or if they want their kid's name in the back of the book. So there's a lot of fun extra rewards that go into it, which means there's a little bit of a premium price. But as the author, as the creator, it means that I'm getting the money before I actually launch the book, which enables me to create a better product. So it's a really great way to fund the project, and then also to bring readers in and have them almost join your publishing team in a sense, and get to partner with you and walk with you alongside the process. And you can update them along the way on how things are going. So I had a lot of fun doing it with book 1 with Road Trip Rescue, and I am doing the campaign for book 2 actually as this podcast is released. So, and from April 16th to May 2nd, I believe, are the dates for the second campaign.
And this is going to be posted on April 18th. So all of you guys listening out there, you have almost a month to get on board if you want to do that. And I will put in the show notes Becca's website address, all the things that you need in order to connect with her more fully. And you have, I see that you do blog posts, and you have a newsletter, right?
Yes, I do have a newsletter, and that's my favorite way to connect with readers, I think, because social media is so hard, and I don't always just have the time for it, but I try to really prioritize my newsletter, making sure that I'm updating people on all the things there, and also posting giveaways or other really great stories for kids. I do book reviews of other middle grade books, because I know for parents and for teachers, it can be so hard to find books that are filled with hope and have good themes and good values that you can trust giving to your kids. So I provide that for grownups. And I also have some free gifts that I send, like short stories and road trip conversation cards that I send when you sign up for my newsletter.
Sweet. So let's talk a little bit about how you, my mind is going blank. See, this is not my optimum time like you. I'm up at 4:30 every morning. That's
Wow.
my optimum time. By this time in the afternoon, I'm just like losing it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other things that you do to market your book besides your newsletter and everything. I saw on your website that you speak as well, or have you do a lot of speaking engagements at schools, and what do you do with that?
Well, author visits are one of my favorite ways to promote the book or to share the book, because one thing that's challenging with writing for middle grade is you're marketing primarily to the parents and the grandparents and teachers. You're marketing to people who buy the books for kids. You're not marketing directly to the kids. So it can really be a challenge when marketing. However, when I get to go to school visits, I'm actually getting to connect directly with readers, which is just, it's so much fun. And I love to talk to them about being an author and what that's like, and to answer any of their questions, because I know how much that meant to me as a kid when I was loving to write, and to know that there's like a real person behind these books, and to know that if they want to be an author and if they love to create stories, that's something that they could do too. It's a very real possibility. And I have so many kids that come up to me after the visit, or even raise their hand during a visit, to share about their story ideas or a book that they're writing. And so those visits are definitely one of my favorite things to do. I've done a lot of private Christian school visits. I have my first public school visit booked. Well, I'm working on booking it, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I also will speak with like homeschool groups or visit with book clubs, things like that. So I love to connect that way. I've also done some like author workshops for conferences and things, but
Nice.
definitely the school visits are just so delightful.
What's probably your most asked question by these kids?
Oh, well, they love to ask questions about my arm. And I have this bag of prosthetic arms that I always bring because from the time I was a baby up until I was in third grade, I used prosthetics. And so it's fun to show them the smallest ones and how they got bigger and also like technologically how they changed a lot. Like the first ones just look kind of like claws, like they really don't look like hands. And then the older one or the newer ones, the bigger ones, they look like a hand and it has like you can paint the nails. But it's crazy to think about the fact that they've changed so much since then. Like if I still used a prosthetic arm, it would be so much different. So I get a lot of questions like, how do you drive a car? How do you tie your shoe?
Oh,
How
how do you tie your shoe?
well, I actually was maybe the first in my kindergarten class to learn how to tie my shoe because I
Really?
had an occupational therapist who really wanted to make sure I could get it. But I use the end of my arm again and I just pull my shoe up close to me. I used to teach kindergarten for 4 years, so I've had a lot of practice tying shoes.
Oh, I'll bet. How good. You've got such a joyful spirit about you. What is the most challenging part of writing, this actual writing for you?
Hmm. I'd say the most challenging part of the actual writing process is probably having enough patience between the first draft and then diving into revisions because I absolutely love the first draft process. I love to like get to know these characters for the first time and to experience the story. And then as soon as I finish, I'm like, okay, this needs help. It is broken and I need to fix it and I need to fix it now. But I know, and like the editor side of my brain, I also offer freelance editing for authors. So the editing side of my brain is like, give it a rest, wait to pick it up again, like give your brain some space from the project. But it is just so tempting to pick it up immediately. So learning to give myself that space and to be patient before I like pick up the story again and dive back in, it can be a challenge for me.
So that's interesting. Do you, when you're writing, you just kind of write it all out and move on? Or because when I write a book, when I write anything, I can't even write the next chapter. Every day that I go back to write, I have to read, edit, and get back into that
Okay.
emotion of the character before I can.
Yeah.
So I'm editing it before I even go to the next chapter. Do you edit while you write, or do you just write it all out?
I don't edit while I write because I found that for me, I get stuck if I do that. If I go back and start editing, I'll get just caught up in it and trying to make every word perfect, and then I won't move forward. So, what I try to do is whenever I end a writing session, I don't end like at the end of a chapter. So, I will always make sure I'm like midway through a scene so that when I pick it up the next day, I'm in the middle of something that I can just keep writing again, that I'm not starting fresh. So I do work with like a loose outline that changes a lot as I go. So I kind of know the direction I'm headed. But as long as I stop midway through a scene, or I've even stopped like midway through a paragraph or even sentence before, then my brain is able to kind of pick up where I left off. If I stop at the end of a chapter, then that's really hard because then I do feel like I have to at least go back and see, okay, like where was I at? What was going on here? And then I can get caught up in editing. And for me, that makes it challenging to keep moving forward.
That might be some food for thought there, because I do find starting the next scene, it could take me a while to jump into that next scene. If I didn't have to start right there, it would be easier. So that makes a lot of sense. So for the writing itself, what is the most, I mean, obviously you love to write, but you have to do research, right? I mean, there's certain things that you
Mhm.
have, you talked about in the book with Kimmy, you were talking about the Adirondacks and some
Mhm.
travel and all that stuff and going into New York. And so do you
Mhm.
visit those places yourself, or do you just research online, or what do you do for your research?
For book one, for Road Trip Rescue, I actually first came up with the idea while my family was planning a trip to the Adirondacks, and we live in Pennsylvania. So our route was very similar to what Kimmy has in the book, even though the towns are fictionalized in Road Trip Rescue. So I had this idea in mind before we did our trip. which meant that the whole way while we were traveling up to New York to the Adirondacks, I was making notes and kind of seeing things along the way. Like we passed an indoor water park. So I thought, oh, I bet I could add that into the story. So I was taking a lot of notes as we went. And then as I was writing, I could look back at pictures. And also Google Earth is always really helpful for doing travel and trying to put yourself back in the setting. Book 2 is a little different because they go all the way to Guatemala. So it's an international adventure. They don't drive to Guatemala, they fly there and then they have their road trip adventure while they're there. But I traveled to Guatemala when I was in college, which was 10 years ago. I can't believe it was 10 years ago that I was there for a semester. And so I have been looking back at pictures. I actually right here have 3 journals. These are 3 journals from my time in Guatemala. So I was looking at them today, but I've been looking back through journals, and I would look on Google Earth again, look through my photos, talk to some of my friends who either still live in Guatemala or had lived there for a longer time. I was only there for a semester and then a couple other visits. So a lot of research like that went into that book.
Awesome. Yeah, you sound like you have it pretty much together. So, what is next for you? I mean, is there going to be book 3 of Road Trip Rescue? Do you have a book 3 in your plan?
Yes. Yes, book 3 will be coming after book 2, and it is Jada's story. So Jada in book 1 is a character that we don't actually meet, but Kimmy talks about. Jada was a friend who really hurt her. So book 3 is posing an interesting challenge because I'm writing from a perspective that readers who have read the first 2 books probably aren't going to like off the bat. So I have to figure out, okay, how do I make readers interested enough in hearing her story and giving her a chance, even though they know things about her past that are going to make her initially unlikable.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember Jada being somebody I want to get to know. How often do we go through life, especially as children, and your perspective is so skewed and you don't really know? I mean, we aren't aware, even as adults, you look at it as an adult and you see somebody that might, you feel is unkind towards you or might be unhappy. We don't know what's happening in their lives, and we make it all about us when sometimes it's nothing to do with us. And I think it's a good thing to get a perspective. I like to always bring in, like my last series of books, I brought somebody in book 2 that was very unlikable, a very unlikable character. And then by the time I got through with that, she had her own novella, and then you could see why she was so unlikable. You could see her backstory.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to bring those kinds of characters in to get a better view of people, and maybe give your readers a perspective of that everybody is not who they appear to be. You have to dig a little deeper to find out. We don't all have the same lifestyle. We don't all have the same advantages. Things happen. So
yeah. Part of my hope in this series, in the Road Trip Rescue series, is to just have really real, raw situations. So these are faith-filled stories, they're adventures, they're fun, they have humor, but also they have really real emotions and they have hard things. There are things that happen where readers are probably going to be like, well, why'd they do that? And diving deeper into emotions and seeing that there are consequences for our emotions and things like that, I think are important to see. And when we see the hurt and when we see the things that are wrong, that only allows for greater transformation and an opportunity to see the characters really grow and change and come to be transformed by Jesus.
absolutely. Do you have any last thoughts for us? Any advice for would-be writers out there?
Well, advice that I love to give writers, especially writers who are just getting started, would be to make sure you surround yourself with others and not to feel like you are in this writing thing on your own. I think it's so easy to think of writers as, sitting in our offices, typing on our computers all by ourselves with our characters and creating these stories. But it's so important to invite others into our process, critique partners and beta readers and actual readers, and above all, to invite God into the process, to pray before you start your story, to let him guide our words. All of that, I think, is so important in creating healthy writing rhythms and routines.
Do you have a critique group that you meet with regularly?
I do. Yeah. I have a critique group that we meet once a month on Zoom, and then we try to get together in person. Well, I don't think we use Zoom anymore, on one of the video platforms. And we try to get together in person once a year too. But it's great because not only do we share our stories with each other, but we also just talk about the writing life, and we talk about being moms and writing and trying to balance writing and family life. And so it's just we've got a text chat, and we're always in contact with each other. So it's a great support system.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just being a writer. You're juggling a lot of different job
Mhm.
descriptions as you're doing this. So I think that's wonderful. Well, Becca, thank you so much. I was just been a thrill to talk with you, and I'm excited to see your next book come out. And I will finish up this book, I promise you. So,
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's been a joy to chat with you.
and I will make sure everybody can contact you. They'll have all of your stuff in your show notes. So there should be no problem getting a hold of you. So y'all check.
Awesome.
And also, if you want to see this on video, it will be on my YouTube channel, so you can watch it there as well. So thank you, Becca. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your week, and that your writing it will just be everything that God wants it to be.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.